Welcome to the Capital News. I'm your host, Alex Kreitis. Today is Wednesday, April 14th, 2021. Thank you so much for joining me. Hope you're all doing well out there today. Title of today's podcast, Bernie Madoff dies. When will the other Ponzi's? So, infamous investor, world-renowned investor, couldn't beat his returns. Of course, it was a Ponzi scheme. Bernie Madoff has passed away in federal prison as he was serving a 150-year sentence for running what may very well prove to be the largest Ponzi scheme, the largest private Ponzi scheme in world history. When you want to talk about public Ponzi schemes, you can't hold a flame to the U.S. government or to the Federal Reserve. So that's the question. Bernie's Ponzi scheme imploded. When will Uncle Sam's? So we're going to get to some market performance. We're going to talk about Bernie Madoff a little bit. We're going to talk about the fraud cycle. We're going to talk about the Ponzi schemes that exist within the federal government, within the Federal Reserve. Jay Powell gave another interview yet again today. If you thought Scott Pelley of 60 Minutes, if you thought that was a softball interview, my God, this one was even more pathetic. But that's par for the course. So that's really no surprise. I want to have a continued conversation on the Derek Chauvin trial. Obviously, the former police officer that is on trial for the death of Mr. George Floyd. So we'll have some updates on that because the defense is likely going to rest their case tomorrow, and we will get to that. And then just a quick headline. U.S. troops are supposed to be pulled out of Afghanistan on September 11th of this year. Now, I don't know why I'm skeptical of this, but I am. 20 years later, and we still have boots on the ground. Now, my concern, of course, is not necessarily that they're going to be pulled out. I believe that they will be pulled out. My concern is where are they going to be moved to? That's the bells and whistles that are going off in my head. Yep, they'll be removed, but where are they going to go? Are they going to go to Ukraine? They're going to go into Russia? They're going to go into Taiwan? They're going to go into the Philippines? They're going to go into China? North Korea? Where are they going to go? Because I can almost guarantee you one thing, they ain't coming back here. They might for a little bit. Hug and kiss their loved ones, and then they're going to be sent out somewhere else. Because I hear the drums of war a-beating. And with everything that's going on, I can just imagine where we're going to end up sending our military next. So we'll be on the lookout for that, and we're going to continue to monitor that throughout the remainder of this year. That is something that we are highly focused on and highly concerned about. I hope I am 100% wrong about conflict and war and all of this type of stuff. But when you look around the globe, it's one thing after the next. And I just don't have a lot of trust and confidence in our fearless leaders. I wouldn't care if they were the Democrats or the Republicans. I don't care who's in power, who has the majority, blah, 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 blah. I don't care. It's the same song and dance. It's the powers behind the curtain. And as they say in The Wizard of Oz, pay no attention to the men behind the curtain. But that's where you're supposed to look. And the other thing that's obviously tragic about Afghanistan is we didn't win it. So we've been involved in this thing for 20 years. We haven't won anything. In fact, if you recall, the first president, our strongman that we put into power, Hamid Karzai, his brother was one of the biggest drug kingpins in the country. You think we didn't know that? Of course, we knew that. And don't you know, we have an opioid crisis in this country. We have a heroin problem in this country. And you know where heroin comes from, don't you? It comes from poppy seed plants. You know where a lot of those plants are grown? Take one good guess. Oh, that's right, Afghanistan. So let's connect the dots, shall we? Now, we're not allowed to connect the dots. The only thing we're allowed to know in this country is there is systemic and institutional racism. Mr. Potato Head is a sexist, and Dr. Seuss is a racist. Those are the only things you're supposed to know here in America. That's it. And a few other things, basically just orders that you're supposed to take from Big Daddy and Big Mommy government. But just connect the dots with me here. We have that type of drug crisis that's ongoing in this country. And the source of it, a lot of it, comes from a country where we have been involved for 20 years. And not just diplomatically speaking, no, with the most powerful military in the world. And how many times have we been told over the past 20 years with this war on terror that drug money can be used to fund terrorism? Now, just try connecting those dots. It shouldn't be that difficult for you. I know you're dumbed down. I know you become zombies by just watching the news all day and listening to these idiots push all this crap. But just please, with the remaining brain cells that might exist, connect these dots or attempt to wake up your friends and your family members who have gone into a zombie-like state of existence. Because that's what we're becoming. We are already the economy of the living dead. Now it's just a question as to when the people are all going to turn into zombies. That's all we're waiting for now. But connect those dots. Opioid crisis, heroin crisis. Where does heroin come from? Where's a lot of those crops grown? Where has the most powerful military been? Yeah, you're not supposed to know that, though. But look into that. See what you come up with. Market performance. Dollar index, 91.68, 91.68. Bitcoin hitting new record, $63,000 a coin. A lot of this is off of the hype out of Coinbase, cryptocurrency exchange that IPO'd this afternoon, hitting $100 billion valuation as was anticipated, then just to reverse course. But I'm not going to focus too much time on that here today. Dollar weakness pretty much across the board, as was the case during last night's podcast that continued through the day session, and pretty much continues to be the case right now, although a little bit of rebalancing taking place overnight right now. Overnight futures trading, the Dow Jones, the S&P 500, and the NASDAQ 100 are all in the green, all up about 1/4 of 1%. Cash trade in Japan is currently flat. Mixed bag across the pond in Europe. Cash trade in Australia is putting on a gain of about 0.6%. Chinese stocks are in the red, giving back 1.1%. A lot of this is on concerns that the Chinese are pulling liquidity out of the system. So is China going to start tightening the reins? That'll be very interesting because that will have global implications. So we're going to monitor that closely because that could be some big news. On the stock price front, Apple gave back 1.8%. Tesla, the penny stock, up 9% yesterday, down 4% today. Microsoft down 1.1%. Amazon down about 2%. Facebook also in the red, giving back 2.25%. JP Morgan, despite beating expectations for first quarter earnings, gave back 1.9%. Johnson & Johnson put on a slight gain of about 1/3%, despite the fact that we are halting their vaccine. Well, I guess the market must understand that Johnson & Johnson is going to be able to keep Uncle Sam's money. About $1.5–2 billion. Now, I'm not saying that for certain, 100% certainty, but I think it's pretty safe to say that if it's proven that this Johnson & Johnson vaccine is dangerous and needs to be pulled from the quote-unquote market, one would maybe think that, yes, the right thing would be for Johnson & Johnson to give the money back. I don't think that's going to happen. So I think that's a reasonable assumption. ExxonMobil put on a gain of about 2.9% off of oil prices rallying today, and Goldman Sachs beating expectations as well, and put on a gain of 2 1/3%. On the commodity front, overnight, we have crude oil WTI at $63.09 a barrel, Brent $66.57, natural gas $2.62. Gold and silver, choppy session today, but gold is at $1,741 an ounce, silver $25.48 an ounce, copper rallied a little bit today as well, $4.14 per pound, and Uncle Sam's 10-year junk note is at 1.63%. So before we get into Bernie Madoff, I just want to talk really about, the language from the Federal Reserve, the softball questions, the whole thing about inflation being transitory, right? These are the same jokers, the same clowns, the same monkeys, the same morons. And no offense to the jokers, the clowns, and the morons. But these are the same people who tell us time and time again that, you don't have to worry about this, you don't have to worry about that. Great financial crisis, subprime. No, there's no crisis in subprime. There's nothing to be concerned about. Oh, if there is a problem in subprime, it will be contained to subprime. Oh, if it gets out of control, it'll be contained to the broader housing market. Oh, it is not a systemic event. It is not going to cause system-wide collapses. But of course it did. Of course it did. Then they implement and come up with quantitative easing, which they tell us is going to be temporary. And of course, temporary is synonymous with transitory, okay? Quantitative easing in a couple of years is going to be qualifying for a driver's license. Okay, that's how temporary or transitory quantitative easing has been. And we continue to put the pedal to the metal. Okay? So now these idiots want to tell us that inflation is going to be transitory. Are you connecting the dots? I know I'm asking a lot today of the people out there to connect dots with Afghanistan, the drug war, blah, 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 blah. And now I'm asking you to connect the dots with what these idiots say, with what's transitory, what's not going to be a problem, it's going to be contained, it's not going to be a systemic event, blah, 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 blah. You're picking up on the trend? You're picking up why these people are not to be trusted? And of course, the same people who are at the helm right now were at the helm during the great financial crisis and in the lead up to the GFC as well. Yet these are the people we're supposed to trust. And unfortunately, we have a media that's in the toilet. They can't ask these people serious questions, which is their job. They are supposed to be the fourth estate, the fourth branch of government. The success and the health of our republic is predicated on an informed citizenry and electorate. But if you got a bunch of dead zombies walking around, well, what do you think's going to happen? Well, exactly what we are getting. Doesn't take a genius to connect these dots. You have people that don't pay attention, couldn't care less. This is what you get. What are we going to end up getting? I think is going to be quite horrendous and quite painful once market forces truly take over. And it's proven that inflation is not going to be transitory or temporary. Why don't you take a look at the price of corn, at the price of soybeans, at the price of wheat, at the price of coffee, at the price of zinc, at the price of tin, iron ore, steel, copper, aluminum, lumber, oil. Why don't you just look at all these prices and see if all of that is just temporary? All of that's just going to be transitory. And this is before the global economy opens up, which presumably, with what these same people tell us, there's a huge amount of pent-up demand. So we don't even have the economy running on all cylinders, and we have prices going up at these levels. So by their very logic, with all of the pent-up demand, and with the economy being so strong and in recovery mode, well, then shouldn't the demand for all of these materials go up with them? And I can assure you, ladies and gentlemen, that the supply of these materials, of these commodities, will not be able to catch pace with what they project from the demand side. So what does that tell you? Prices are going to continue to go up, 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 and up. But it's transitory, and you don't have to worry about it. And of course, most of this crap isn't captured in the official government statistic of inflation. Why would it be? Why would we get a realistic picture of what's actually taking place in the real economy? Which leads us to Ponzi scheme number 1, which is Social Security. By definition, it is a Ponzi scheme. What makes it actually even worse is the fact that you are not voluntarily giving your money to Uncle Sam. He takes it out of your paycheck every week to fund people who have worked who are now retired. So new investors, if you will, paying the quote unquote returns of the original or older investors. That's by definition a Ponzi scheme. But I guess because the government's doing it, there's nothing wrong with it. And of course, the running joke is Bernie Madoff should have been appointed the chair of the Federal Reserve or the Treasury Secretary. Because, hell, if you want somebody in those seats who knows how to operate a Ponzi scheme, who has experience doing it, well, then that's who they should have employed. That's who they should have put there. They shouldn't have sentenced him to 150 years in prison. Oh, no. They should have made him the Federal Reserve chair or the Treasury Secretary. He has experience doing it. I mean, the government is known to employ criminals who go above and beyond. You're so good, you're going to work for the government. If that doesn't tell you something. That's what they should have done with Bernie. The government could have said, well, we're going to make everybody else whole. We're just going to borrow the money. Bernie can be in charge of that too. He can issue the debt or he can finance it, whatever side of the ledger he's on. And we'll just make all of the investors that he screwed over whole again. But he's so good at it that we have to hire him. We can't put him behind bars. You can't do that. That man is a genius. We can't punish him. No, we have to punish everybody else by making him the Fed chair or the Treasury Secretary. Now, thank God that didn't happen. But it could have. It could have. And who knows, maybe he would have been better than Hank Paulson or a Timothy Geithner or a Jack Lew or a Mnuchin or a Dingbat Yellen. I mean, how could you have been much worse? Okay? I mean, come on. So that's the first Ponzi scheme. And then, of course, the other Ponzi scheme is just the whole government in general. Our debt market, our bond market. We're just layering more and more debt onto the system. And I believe this. If it wasn't for the great financial crisis, Bernie Madoff would still be in business. He never would have been caught. He never would have turned himself in. Because he wouldn't have had to have. It was the great financial crisis that brought him down. Had he had the ability of the federal government to tax people or to print money, of course he would still be in business. That's why the government is still in business. Because it has the ability to tax, even though we borrow more money than we bring in through taxation. By a long shot. The government can sustain itself. The economy collapsed. The game was over for Bernie, and he turned himself in. And I could imagine one of the reasons why he turned himself in was because he was afraid for his life. Because he had money of some very powerful people. And he very well may have thought, cost-benefit-wise, he's safer behind bars than he is in his penthouse in New York City. And of course, some of our largest financial institutions, namely J.P. Morgan, which was the bank for Bernie Madoff, knew that he was running a Ponzi scheme. They had to have. And we've discussed this before, too. When you had that bombshell report come out, which nobody wants to talk about with the financial sector. We did a few podcasts on that last year. Those suspicious activity reports, those SARs, if you recall. You know, anti-money laundering, that type of stuff. But J.P. Morgan knew what was going on. But they were making too much money. As were so many other people who were involved in assisting Bernie Madoff. Again, that's the same point I try to drive home here all the time. People do not care. Do not care what's going on, at what expense, as long as their 401ks and their brokerage accounts go up, up, and away. People don't care. It's a Ponzi scheme. Maybe the guy's running a Ponzi scheme. Yes, maybe I'm sort of diverting people to invest in Bernie Madoff. Maybe he's doing something, but I don't know for certain. So, you know, I can ride the line. Maybe he's doing something illegal, because who can really have these types of returns year in and year out? But I'm making so much damn money, that's their problem. I'm getting mine. That's their problem if they're taking that risk. That's the world in which we live in. That's the world in which we live in. You thought it was bad with Bernie. Just take a deep breath and look and observe what is taking place here today. People don't care that they don't even know that it's at the expense of this country, our body politic, and our society at large. You think we would be having these stupid conversations of Dr. Seuss being a racist and Mr. Potato Head being a sexist if we had a vibrant economy? Do you really think we'd be having these ridiculous conversations? No, there's not a chance in hell. That's why I focus more on the economics and the finance of everything as opposed to all these cultural wars. Because to me, that comes secondary. The environment has to be set in order for politics to collapse and for society to collapse. And I believe, and you can disagree, of course, but I believe that stems from the economy. It's the economy, stupid. If people are busy, if people are productive, and it's a real economy, not smoke and mirrors, then people are going to call all this stuff nonsense. But when they're so depressed, when they're so frustrated, when there's lack of opportunity, people are going to believe things. This is what they're going to be focused on because there's nothing else they can do. And when it's blasted into their brains 24/7, sooner or later people are going to start to believe it. That's where we are. That's what's going on. And speaking of Bernie Madoff, you cannot forget the man who uncovered it, Harry Markopolos or Harry Markopolos. I've heard both pronunciations. I'm not certain which one is correct, so forgive me for that. But nonetheless, Harry Markopolos, a forensic accountant, an investigator, was on this case, was on Bernie for almost 9 years. Almost 9 years. He was submitting documents to the SEC and government agencies, and nothing happened. How many people could have been saved if they had listened to this guy? And we've talked about Harry before, about General Electric in 2019, because that was another target on his fraud list. And I'm sure with all of the shenanigans that took place in 2020, that's been covered up. Because I'm going to put my money on Mr. Markopolos. So I am sure that all of this funny money is just covering up so many different frauds and other Ponzi schemes that exist within the system. And as we've stated here on numerous occasions, citing Jim Chanos, a well-known hedge fund manager and known for being a short seller, but he has a long short book. He's not just always short, but known for being a short seller, and is also a professor of financial history. He tells us that the fraud cycle follows the business cycle, which makes intuitive sense, which is the exact thing that we just stated with respect to Bernie Madoff. When things look good in the smoke and mirrors economy, Bernie Madoff was in business. But when the business cycle came to an end and everything goes down, well, we get to see who all the fraudsters are. So you think we're through the woods. You think we're out of the woods. You think this is some type of recovery. We haven't even dealt with the fraud cycle yet. We haven't even dealt with the true cleansing of the business cycle. That's what all this funny money continues to prop up. That's why we are the economy of the living dead. Wait till all of this stuff comes down. Then we're going to have to deal with the fraud cycle. Then we're going to have to see how many Ponzi schemes are being operated right now. We're going to have to see how many accounting frauds are being run right now in some of the biggest companies on the planet. I can guarantee it. I can guarantee it. So how anybody can say that we are out of the woods, you got to be smoking something. Maybe the drugs coming from Afghanistan. Oops, I shouldn't have said that. So we are far from out of the woods. On to the Derek Chauvin trial. Before we get to that, I just want to give another analogy, because I like this analogy, with respect to the economy, the business cycle, and corrections. Corrections are healthy things. And the analogy that I like to give to the audience is if you were to write a paper, a research paper, any type of paper for a class assignment, okay? You do your research, you write the paper, you like it, you think it's good, but you get it done with a few days before the deadline, and you figure, well, I don't necessarily want to turn it in yet. Let me give it to the professor, though, and maybe he can grade it. Maybe give me some pointers. And he does. He grades it and gives you the paper back, and there's a bunch of red ink throughout the paper. Now, you're upset because you put a lot of time into writing it, but had you had turned it in that current state, you would have gotten a C, a D, whatever. Now, with those corrections, if you should make them, the professor's going to give you a B, maybe even an A. That's a good thing. Corrections are good things. But I want to take this analogy one step further, because I want to talk about the smoke and mirrors economy, where so many people think it's just what you see. People do a lot of seeing, if you will. They don't do a lot of looking. Okay, and I'm going to tell you what I mean by this. So we'll use the same analogy of a paper. The smoke and mirrors of it all. People thinking that the economy was booming in the lead up to the great financial crisis. You would not have had a great financial crisis if the economy was truly booming from a fundamental standpoint. But it was all smoke and mirrors. So that would be akin to writing a paper and having a lot of words that look like sentences, that looks like proper punctuation and grammar, on one page after the next. Page after page after page, all of these words, all of these sentences, all of this punctuation. And because you see all of these words on all of these pages, you think it's a solid paper. You think it's a great report. How could all of this have happened if it wasn't great? But nobody's looking at it. They just see it. They just see the words on it. But they're not reading them. They're not turning the page after page. Once you start to actually look, and God forbid you start to read it, you find out it's a bunch of nonsense. It's a bunch of crap. It's a bunch of garbage. This is not a complete sentence. This is not a complete thought. The grammar is terrible. The punctuation, reckless. But nobody wants to take the time to do the looking, because that would take effort. It's much easier just to see. Oh, yeah, there's pages. There's words. There's a lot of pages, lots of words. Must be good. It isn't. Start taking the red pen through that thing, and that's all it's going to be. Red ink through and through. That's what continuously happens in our economy. People see things and they think, whoa, it looks good. Once they start to read it, once you start to lift the hood, look under the hood, into the engine, like I attempt to do here on the Capital News podcast, on the capitalnews.com, Capital Economics presentations. We say, not so good. Not because I'm a pessimist, but because I'm a problem solver, and I want to find the problem so we can solve it. Not to continue to kick the can down the road and pretend that none of this stuff matters. It does matter. There are problems. They're getting bigger by the day. And nobody wants to press our fearless leaders, whether elected or appointed, because everybody's in on it. Because everybody's 401k and brokerage account goes up, not realizing at what expense. And by the time people realize at what expense all of this has been, it's going to be too late. On to the Derek Chauvin trial. So today the defense put forward their medical expert, a forensic pathologist, former chief medical examiner for the entire state of Maryland. I did not catch the entirety of the testimony. I did catch a good bit of it. I found the doctor to be credible. I found his testimony to be, like I said, creditworthy. And I think he was able to do a decent enough job for the defense, where you may be able to raise a reasonable doubt. Now, I am not going to give the audience my decision as to what I think the jury should do. And the reason is because I have not heard everybody's testimony. I have not heard every question asked and every point made by the prosecution or the defense. So I think that would be irresponsible of me to do so. If I want to be a de facto juror, I have to listen to the entirety of the trial, and I simply have not done that. But I do understand criminal law enough to know that the state, the prosecution, has to prove beyond a reasonable doubt the guilt of the defendant. The burden of proof is on the state. Rightly so. It's a good system. It's how it should be. You are innocent until proven guilty. The defense doesn't even have to put up a case if they don't want to. That could be their strategy. The state does not have enough evidence. They do not have a compelling enough argument. And the defense will simply have opening statements and a summation, and that'll be it. Now, that's not often the cause. Many times the defense does put up a case, will put up witnesses. And that is the case here. Now, the defense is likely going to rest their case tomorrow. There is supposed to be another witness. We do not know who that witness is going to be, so there's speculation that it's going to be perhaps another use of force expert, a cardiologist, or perhaps even Derek Chauvin himself. And of course, there's back and forth debate as to whether that would be a wise move for Mr. Chauvin to take the stand or not. He doesn't have to. And of course, if he does not take the stand, the judge will give the jurors the order. He will tell them that they cannot hold that against Mr. Chauvin. He has the right not to testify. So the jury cannot hold that against him. So we'll see who that witness is. And despite the credibility of the defense's medical witness, the prosecution was able to break some of his arguments down, just like the defense, in my opinion, has been able to break down the prosecution's witnesses as well. This is a very politically charged case, and I understand that what I'm about to say is going to sound wishy-washy, but this is just how I see it. I would not be surprised if the jury finds Mr. Chauvin guilty of one of the charges. I think it'll be the lesser of all the charges, but guilty nonetheless. I will not be surprised if they acquit him. And I will also not be surprised if it is a hung jury. There are a lot of moving parts. The trial is still not over. So there is still other witness testimony to be heard. But nonetheless, this is a politically charged trial. The jurors are from the area. This is their home. This is their communities. They saw what took place last year. There's no doubt that that is somewhere in their minds. Some of them, it's right out front. Some of them, it's in the back of their minds. If they acquit Officer Chauvin, former Officer Chauvin, pretty damn certain that their city is going to go up in flames again. I think that's possible whether he's acquitted or convicted. But most definitely if he's acquitted, even if there's a hung jury. So they don't want to see their communities get burned again. But that's not reason to put somebody behind bars if you actually think that they are innocent or the state has not proven their case beyond a reasonable doubt. We cannot give in to mob rule. We cannot allow that to happen. This is a tragedy. This man should not have died. Unless it was a pure coincidence of everything coming together and he was bound to have a heart attack regardless. But as I stated yesterday, there are a lot of things that took place last year with respect to this case that was not the fault of Mr. Chauvin. That doesn't mean that Mr. Floyd should have died as a result of it, but he did. He did. And this is where we are. And with the other young man who was killed on Sunday, and all of the protests and riots taking place again in Minnesota, very close to where the trial was taking place of Mr. Chauvin. I mean, the hits just keep on coming. And of course, the race baiters and the race hustlers love it. Don't let them fool you. They love it. This is how they make their living. Black Lives Matter, that organizer, that founder, she's buying $1 million real estate all over the place. It's a tragedy what's taking place in this country. It's a tragedy that we don't have to look at it. That the mainstream media, that the political left continues to look at everything through the lens and prism of color. Clearly, they don't want to listen to the words and wisdom of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. They couldn't care less about that man, evidently, because everything is about the color of your skin. I mean, this medical pathologist is South African. And I've been watching the coverage on HLN. And when it goes to commercial break, or or I should say when the trial goes on break for lunch or whatever, a sidebar, you'll have the quote-unquote experts giving their expert analysis and opinion. And one woman, a white woman, because it's important to know her color of her skin, she makes the statement, which if I was the host of this show, I would have kicked her off. I wouldn't have let her make the statement because I knew where she was going with this. As soon as she started opening her mouth, she was like, well, you all understand the elephant in the room, don't you? Do you really think it was a smart move by the defense to bring in a medical expert from South Africa? Because clearly all South Africans are racist. This idiot obviously didn't understand what she was saying because she opens the door for this man's entire career as a medical examiner and as the chief medical examiner for the entire state of Maryland. She opens up the door for every case that this man has ever touched because he's South African. And that by common sense, according to this dingbat, it makes him a racist. So anytime he had a case that either had a black victim or a black suspect, and he was the medical examiner, you got to reopen all those cases. I would have shut this woman's mic off. I would have shut her off before she even made these comments because you knew where she was going with it. But no, you can't do that because everything is about race. You have a black attorney on there, a female black attorney on there as one of the experts. Perfectly fine. I couldn't care less what color skin she is. I couldn't care less what race she is. I could not care less. Those of you who have been with me know this. Couldn't care less. But of course, as she gives her analysis, she has to tell the world, she has to tell the audience that as a black woman, because everything is about race and color. Now, perhaps maybe she was just informing the blind members of the audience that she was a black woman, but I don't think that really makes a difference. But in the world we live in now, the mainstream media, the ridiculous politics, especially of the left, the Liberal Party, the Progressive, the Democrat Party, this is where they're taking us. And enough is enough. It's disgusting. And of course, should Mr. Chauvin be acquitted, or should there be a hung trial, can you imagine the rhetoric that's going to come out about the racism, the systemic, the institutional racism, blah, 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 blah. No justice, no peace, our cities are going to burn again. Not questioning the justice system, not really looking at the evidence, the facts of the case. That's the problem here. Nobody cares about the facts. Nobody cares about the evidence. Nobody cares about the truth. It's the video that everybody saw 1 year ago, as bad as it was. And based off of that, guilty, end of story. Now, it's easy for people to judge that and make that statement. What happens if it's you on the other side of that table? What if it's you in the defendant's seat? You're going to think that's the right way to be? No, it isn't. Because we are now in an era where the facts do not matter. It's all about how people feel. It's your feelings. It's your feelings. It's your feelings. If you feel that somebody is a racist, you don't have to put forward any evidence, any proof of this. That's just how you feel. Doesn't matter if you're going to ruin that individual's life, their reputation. It's just how you feel. Because if it's somebody who is in a position of power or authority or is a social media influencer or whatever, and they should go after somebody and claim that somebody is a racist, you're going to have a hard time proving otherwise. That's the society we live in. It's extremely dangerous. Whether it's based off of race, whether it's a sexual assault allegation, people's lives have been ruined and will continue to be ruined in this era because of this. Not because of facts, not because of the truth. All I want is justice to be served for Mr. Floyd and for Mr. Chauvin. That's the justice system. That's how it's supposed to work. The man's found guilty. Hey, if that was all of the evidence, if that's what the jury finds, that's what they find. If they find him, if they acquit him, I can live with that too. Hung jury, I can understand that too. I just want justice to be served. I want the truth to be had out. Not feelings, not the fear of mob rule. Just the truth and justice to be served. That shouldn't be too much to ask. Unfortunately, it is. Just like so much else that's taking place in our country at this time. It's too much to expect the truth. It's too much to expect responsibility and accountability from one elected official or bureaucrat after the next. We were just simply asking too much. The foundation upon which this country was built, those values, those virtues, all of that is too much to ask. And that should be all you need to know as to where we are today. And isn't it telling? Bernie Madoff is dead. When will the other Ponzis go along with it? Stay diversified, stay vigilant, and stay with the Capital News. I am Alex Karitis. Godspeed.